Shalom, everyone. I'm Josiah Geoffrey.
I'm Hosea Geoffrey.
Welcome to Solid Scripture, where the whole discussion is totally by the book. Today, we're continuing our walk through the Bible in the book of Judges. Today's reading is from Judges 3:12 through 5:31. We've already read the passage ahead of time, but if you'd like to read it as well, why don't you go ahead and pause the video and do that, and then we'll go ahead and get into discussing.
In this portion, God punishes Israel through the nation of Moab, but delivers them by the hand of the judge Ehud. And when Israel returns to sinning yet again, he subjugates them to the cruelty of the Canaanites before giving more deliverance to his people by the faithful service of Deborah and Barak.
So this portion begins by talking about how God raises up Ehud to deliver the people of Israel. We had read in the last portion that the people of Israel have been going into sin and rebellion against God, and so God has started a cycle now where he's punishing the people of Israel through foreign invaders until they turn back to him, and once they do that, then God raises up a judge to deliver them. And we've already seen that cycle happen once with the first judge named Othniel. And so this portion begins by saying that the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of ADONAI. And so ADONAI then brought the Moabites in to invade Israel, and they set up shop in the city of Palms, which is another name for Jericho, and they are basically oppressing the people of Israel and forcing them to pay tribute. So for the next 18 years, the Moabites, along with the people of Ammon and Amalek, are oppressing the people of Israel, led by the super fat king named Eglon, who is a horrible tyrant who is oppressing the people of Israel. And so then the book of Judges goes on to describe how an Israelite named Ehud from the tribe of Benjamin, he's leading an Israeli envoy to deliver tribute to King Eglon. And it mentions the peculiar detail that Ehud is left-handed. And what King Eglon doesn't know is that Ehud has hidden a sword on his right thigh. Now, normally you would have a sword on your left thigh, but since Ehud's left-handed, he would have it on his right thigh, so that way he could reach in with his left hand and draw it out. But Eglon does not know this. And so as Ehud and the other Israelites are turning to leave the special private chamber of King Eglon after dropping off their tribute, Ehud turns around and he says to the king, "I have a secret message for you." And so Eglon says, "All right, hold that thought. Everyone else get out." And so it's just Ehud and Eglon, the super fat king, alone in this chamber. And so Ehud says, "I have a really special secret message from God for you."
Oh, really?
"Oh, really? What is it?" And then Ehud draws out his sword and stabs Eglon in the gut. And it says that Eglon is so fat. How fat is he? He's so fat. He's so fat that the sword is sticking out of him and the hilt handle is sticking out of his gut, and the fat envelops the handle of the sword as it's sticking through him. And then it says that the refuse came out of him, or maybe the tip of the sword came out of him, or his intestines fell out, or something. Something came out of something. Different translations vary, but something came out of something, and Eglon slumps over dead in his upper chamber. And Ehud is the one who killed him, but he did it totally in private, and so no one else knows. And so Ehud just leaves the room, locks the doors behind him, and walks away. And Eglon's servants are just like waiting for him because they think that he's just hanging out in there, maybe relieving himself in the upper room. And so they're just standing out there, and it says that they're standing there until they get embarrassed. And then they finally are like, "He's been in there a really long time." And so they get a key, they unlock the door, and they find Eglon dead. And they're like, "Uh-oh."
Whoops. And so while Eglon's servants have been standing around waiting until they're embarrassed, Ehud has been making his smooth getaway deep into the hill country of Ephraim. And once he's there, it says that he sounds the trumpet to summon the people of Israel to war. And he says, "Follow after me, for ADONAI has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand." And so he gathers all the people of Israel from all over the place, and he's their leader, and he goes at the head of them, and they charge in and they fight against the Moabites. And God is with Ehud and with the people of Israel, and they deliver a crushing defeat against the people of Moab. It says that 10,000 strong warriors of the Moabites were all killed. No one escaped. And so Moab's army is completely crushed. And so Israel no longer has to serve Moab. Instead, it says that Israel subdued Moab that day. Israel is free and they have deliverance. And it says that the land had rest for an entire 80 years. So this deliverance by Ehud really had a major impact for the people of Israel. So what I noticed about this story is that Israel had been oppressed under this huge army of the Moabites for a long time. But it only took one man, Ehud's, one action to kickstart the deliverance of Israel. No doubt it was a bold action. He had to go to the king in the king's own palace and kill him, surrounded by all his people and all his guards and all his attendants. But Ehud was nonetheless willing to do that. And because he did that one bold action, he was then able to rally the people. He blew that trumpet and he said, "Follow after me. Follow me, and God is going to give us victory." And it worked. The people rallied around Ehud. And so this should be encouragement for us to know that when God is with us, we should be acting boldly. We don't need to wait to see what other people are going to do. We don't need to make sure that we have enough of a team to take this on. If God is with us, we need to be willing to do his work. We need to be willing to be first and take the bold action, the action that no one else dares to do, because that has an effect on people. People will rally behind someone who's going to do a bold action and set an example for other people to follow and say, "Come follow me, God is working, and we're going to have victory." Yeshua himself, when he was on earth, he left himself as an example for us to follow. And he said, if they're going to hate me, they're going to hate you. But if they're going to listen to me, then they're going to listen to you. You need to do what I do. You need to follow me. You need to pick up your execution stake just like I'm doing. So Yeshua exemplifies that courage, that boldness has an effect on people and leaves an example for other people to follow. So as we follow Yeshua's example, we need to be bold and encourage other people, "Come follow me. I know the way. I know what to do."
So after telling this story about Ehud, and after briefly mentioning another judge named Shamgar, who also delivered Israel from the Philistines down in the south of Israel, the book of Judges then moves on to talk about how God delivered Israel through Deborah and Barak. What it says is that after Ehud dies and there's this 80-year period of peace, what happens is the people of Israel again start being evil. And so God's like, all right, well, I gotta punish you guys again. Come on. And so this time, God sends a Canaanite king named Jabin and his commander of his army named Sisera. And it says that they have 900 iron chariots, and they are basically terrorizing the northern areas of Israel. There have been a few other times when it's mentioned iron chariots, like it's this really big deal, because that would basically be state-of-the-art military technology at that point. And it says that they are oppressing the sons of Israel for 20 years with these iron chariots. And so during this time, there is a prophetess named Deborah, and she is the judge of Israel, and she lives in the hill country of Ephraim, and people will come to her to receive judgments from God, kind of like hearing court cases. So unlike the previous judges that we've read about, Deborah is not a military leader of the people of Israel. She's someone that people come to for hearing what God wants them to do. And so Deborah, she ends up calling a guy named Barak from the tribe of Naphtali. And she basically says to Barak, you're going to be leading the people of Israel and you are going to be their deliverer to defeat Israel's enemies.
And so in response to Deborah charging Barak and saying, hey, you got to go fight the Canaanites and Sisera with all his chariots and God's going to be with you and he's going to deliver you, Barak's like, I'll tell you what, if you go with me, then I'll do it. But if you don't go with me, no, man. So that's very interesting on Barak's part to be like, he has some faith to a point. He knows that God will be with him if Deborah is with him. But without Deborah, he doesn't feel so sure. And so he's appealing to Deborah like, hey, can you help me out here? And Deborah's like, okay, fine. But the road you're going on is not going to get glory for you because you're not going to be the one to defeat Sisera this way. A woman is going to defeat Sisera this way. And Barak's like, Okay, it works for me. And so Barak proceeds to put out a call to muster the army, just like Ehud had done previously. Barak is saying, everyone come on, we're going to fight the Canaanites and we're going to win. And so he assembles an army, mostly from the people of Zebulun and Naphtali, which are some of the northernmost tribes, which are where Sisera is oppressing the people the most. And so Barak does summon a fairly sizable army, 10,000 troops. But Sisera hears about it, and he's like, oh, we got to deal with this. And he gets all 900 of his iron chariots and prepares to show them who's boss with his iron chariots, man.
Little did he know.
And so now the army of Israel and the chariots of Sisera are lined up for battle. And Deborah says to Barak, up, for this is the day in which ADONAI has given Sisera into your hand. Does not ADONAI go out before you? And so with this encouragement, Barak's like, charge! And so they run at the army of Sisera and all his chariots and all his men, and God goes before them, and it says that God routs the chariots. And so they turn around, they're fleeing, they're like, oh no, what are we gonna do? These chariots that were so big and macho before, now they're running away. And it says that the torrent of a river that they pass through, it pushes them away and sweeping away the chariots. And the only way Sisera saves his life is by getting out of the chariot, and he runs away on foot. So much for his chariots. Sisera's entire army is completely destroyed by Barak and his army because God was fighting for them. And so no man survives except Sisera alone, who escapes the scene of the battle.
So just like Deborah had said through the Spirit of God, Barak did defeat the armies of Sisera. But also, like she said, Barak didn't get to defeat Sisera himself. God was going to give him into the hands of a woman. And so what we read next is about a woman named Jael, who was the wife of a man from the Kenites. We had read about the Kenites last time. They were the Gentile descendants of the father-in-law of Moses, who lived down in the cities of Judah. And so there's one particular Kenite who has actually moved from the south where Judah is. They've moved all the way up to Naphtali in the north. And so this Kenite's wife is named Jael. And we don't know if Jael herself is a Kenite or an Israelite, but whatever the case, this Kenite is on friendly terms with the Canaanite occupation, and so Sisera sees him as an ally. And so as he's running away on foot, terrified for his life, looking for somewhere to turn, he sees the tent of this Kenite, and he's like, oh, I can go over there. And Jael's like, come on in, come on in. And so Sisera runs to her tent, and he is exhausted. He's tired, he's thirsty, and he's like, can you please just get me some water? And don't tell anyone I'm here. If anyone comes looking for me, don't tell anyone I'm here. And so Jael's like, all right, I'll give you some milk to drink. So milk would actually presumably make him even sleepier than he already was. And so he drinks that milk, and then he just falls right asleep because he's so exhausted. And so what Jael does is she grabs a big honkin' tent peg and a mallet, puts the tent peg on the temple of Sisera as he's laying there, and hammers it through his skull and pierces his skull to the ground and kills him on the spot as he sleeps. And so as Barak is chasing Sisera, trying to find him, where is he? I gotta get him. Jael goes out and is like, hey, Barak, come here, I'll show him to you. And so there, Sisera is dead, killed at the hands of a woman, just like Deborah had said. And so this horrible enemy of the people of Israel is now dead, and the people of Israel can rejoice.
And so at this point, Deborah and Barak sing a song of praise to ADONAI and rejoicing at the victory that he's done for the people of Israel. And it starts, that the leaders took the lead in Israel, that the people offered themselves willingly, bless ADONAI. And then basically Deborah and Barak, they sing about how desperate their situation was before, how there were no more villages because the Canaanites had destroyed all the villages and the highways were abandoned and everyone was so scared, and there were no weapons with which to defend themselves, and everything was just terrible. But then they talk about how Deborah and Barak arose, that they called the people to action, and the people responded. And then it goes through basically tribe by tribe, talking about, bless you, Ephraim, bless you, Benjamin, bless you, Manasseh, you're all so great for listening. But then it lists the tribes that didn't respond, Reuben and Gilead from Manasseh, and Dan and Asher, and like they all did not respond to the call to action, and they didn't help fight, and so they're like, you guys stink. And so basically Deborah and Barak are in this way exalting the people who are willing to do this service, who were willing to fight, because God gave victory through them and saved the people of Israel through them, whereas the others didn't. And so they didn't participate in that. And instead of participating in God's salvation, they were aloof at best. And so after exalting the people who responded to the call for action, it then recounts how God gave victory through them and how the river swept away all the chariots, and God is so great, he did this. And then it goes on, continuing the story, to praise Jael for what she did, how she took in Sisera in order to kill Sisera. And then it ends by describing from the perspective of Sisera's mother, how she would be looking longingly out the window, like, where is Sisera? Why hasn't he returned? And she and her attendants, they convinced themselves, okay, he's got to be waiting because he had victory, because he's dividing the spoil. We're probably worrying about nothing, right? And then the song ends with saying, so may all your enemies perish, O ADONAI, but your friends be like the sun as he rises in his might. So like it ends on a really dark note, but then it does have that hope. It's like, so for your enemies, there's this darkness, there's this judgment, but for your friends, there is deliverance and there is salvation and there is endurance and peace.
Now, going back again over this story to hit some highlights, we want to talk about here that Barak here is actually mentioned again later in Hebrews 11, very briefly, as an example of faith. And the book of Hebrews also says that by faith, the armies of the enemies gave way. And so what we see here is that this entire victory, it actually happened through faith. Like we said earlier, it was kind of a weird faith where it's like, I trust that I'll have this victory as long as Deborah's with me, but if she's not with me, then I Right. And so Barak is setting this condition of, I'll only do what God's asking me to do if the prophetess of God is going with me. So on the one hand, God took away some of the honor that Barak could have had from just following him just right like that. If Barak had gone all the way without needing to set conditions, then he would have gotten the full honor. But even without that, what we're seeing is that Barak is 100% sure that he will have that victory as long as God is with him. What he's not confident about is that God will be with him if Deborah isn't with him.
Right.
But when he's sure that God is with him, then he is 100% sure by faith that that victory will occur because God said it would. And so that's what gives him the boldness to lead this army against these 900 iron chariots and defeat Sisera in this way, or rather defeat Sisera's armies in this way. And so this should be an example to all of us to have faith as well. Because like it says in the song of Deborah, the leaders led in Israel and the people freely offered themselves. They volunteered. When God said, you're going to defeat the armies of Sisera, they were like, I'm going to do it. I'm not being forced to. I'm not being ordered to. I'm going to do it because God is going to give us victory. They freely gave that offering. And Barak freely accepted the call that Deborah was giving to him from God, which is, you are going to be the one who defeats Sisera. So likewise for all of us, when God gives us a call, we should be confident that God is going to give us what we need to accomplish it. We need to trust in him, even if it seems like the odds are stacked against us, because the odds were stacked against the people of Israel, except for the fact that they had God fighting on their side. If God is for us, who can be against us? And so that's what Sisera found out for himself, was that when the people of Israel were volunteering themselves for Adonai's cause, not being in rebellion against God, which is what gave Sisera the ability to oppress Israel already, when God was fighting for Israel and Israel was fighting and helping God, then that is what gave Sisera into their hands, and nothing could stand in the way of the people of Israel.
In Psalm 20, verse 7, It says, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of ADONAI our God. They collapse and fall, but we rise and stand upright. Sisera and his armies had all their trust in the chariots, and from the look of things, they had the advantage. But God was on the side of Israel, and God shows chariots, horses, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how superior your army is. All that matters is whether God is on your side or not. If God is on your side, you have the superior army because God is fighting for you. The whole idea of the iron chariots is that they should be strong, they should be sturdy, they should be unable to be tackled. But God caused them to collapse and run and flee and get swept away. Whereas the people of Israel on foot were able to withstand the chariots because God was with them. And ultimately, it was because they were trusting in God, trusting in ADONAI their God, which takes faith. Because Barak had the faith to trust in God and respond to his call, God was with him and gave him victory, even over chariots. And so this is the key thing. When you trust God, when you have faith in God, you will respond to his call. You will believe what he says that you can do, and you will do what he says you must do. Because if you believe in the all-powerful God of the universe and he tells you something, of course it's true. And if he gives you an order, you better follow it, because you not only trust in what he can do to your enemies, you trust in what he can do to you. So of course, if you trust God, you do what he says. And that's how faith is proven through action.
And going back to the Song of Deborah, where it talks about how some of the tribes didn't respond to that call, and they basically let the other tribes fight when they were just not. They were ignoring the enemy. There's one particular part, it talks about a specific city in Israel. It says, "Curse Meroz, said the angel of ADONAI. Utterly curse its inhabitants, because they did not come to the help of ADONAI, against the warriors." So this is a really interesting way of putting it, where they were supposed to be helping ADONAI. It's not that God was helping Israel. It was that God was fighting against Israel's enemies, and he was telling Israel, you need to come and help me. So the victory is God's, and it was Israel's choice of whether or not they were going to help God or not. And as we saw, when they did help God, then that brought honor and it brought victory. There was so much honor to those who did help God and who did help Barak and Deborah, and they ended up defeating the armies of Sisera. But to those who just stood back and laid back and watched as it all happened in front of them, there were curses, and it's forever memorialized in the scriptures that they didn't help. And so likewise for all of us, God has his plans, his immovable plans that have been fixed since forever. But at the same time, God gives all of us a choice, and he calls us to help him. We can either walk in his ways and help his plans, or we can walk against his ways and go against his plans. And if we choose inaction, then that's the same as going against his ways. And so we all need to remember that we have personal responsibility. Yes, the victory belongs to God, but we are all still called. Each and every one of us are called to follow God's commands, do what he says, and walk in his ways. God has given us a choice, and he calls us to follow him. Yeshua, the Master Yeshua himself, calls us to follow him and to proclaim his truth. And so if we want to receive the blessings of God, if we want to be pleasing to our Master, then we need to help him. He doesn't need our help because he's the God of the universe, but we need to help him. And so in that way, God can be glorified through us, and we can receive the promises that God is promising.
And so the big takeaway from this portion is that you should offer yourself willingly for God's service in faith and boldness. When God gave deliverance to the people of Israel, he did it by the hand of his judges. And so, of course, in order to raise up the judges, he called the judges to action, and the judges had to respond and act. And so we see that with Ehud, even though there was no one else with him, he was by himself, he acted in boldness. He did what God wanted him to do, and he was like, hey, God's got a message for you. And so he did what God's message was, which was death. But he took that bold action because God was calling him to do it, and because God was going to save the people of Israel. And from that point, he rallied the people. He called the people. He said, it's time. God is with us. God has given the Moabites into your hand. And so in response to that call, the people of Israel fought and they won and they had victory and freedom. And so it's the same thing again with Deborah and Barak, even more obviously and strongly. Deborah issues this call to Barak and said, hey, are you going to do it? And Barak says, if you're with me, God's with me, and I'm going to do it. And so Barak responded to the call. He had the faith to say, they have their chariots, I have the God of Israel. And so with that, he was able to fight and he was able to win, and he called the people to action, and the people who responded were able to share in God's victory, and they have praise from God and from the people. But the people who held themselves back were cursed by the judges of God. That is not a great position to be in. God makes it clear that he can win any victory and that he fights for all who love him and who offer their service to him. But to those who are God's enemies, who resist him and his people and his plan, God destroys them. He defeats them. No matter what they put their trust in, no matter what chariots they have, they can't do a thing against the God of Israel. So you need to make sure you're not putting your trust in anything besides God. Because if you put your trust in God and you exercise that faith by responding to his call to action and doing what he tells you to do, then he will cause you to stand and to rise and to have salvation.
That wraps up this episode of Solid Scripture. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions for us to answer or ideas for future videos, why don't you let us know down in the comments? We would love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to keep updated on new videos. And if you would, please consider sending us a donation to help us make more videos like these. We would really appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next week. God bless.